He called her a nobody in front of everyone. Richard Sterling, a man who clawed his way to millionaire status, looked at his wife, Linda, and saw nothing but a simple, plain embarrassment. He did it at the biggest gala of the year, mocking her dress, her common background, and her quiet nature. He told the entire room she was lucky he'd saved her from obscurity. What he didn't know, the room belonged to her. The servers, the building, the bank funding his entire empire. It was all owned by her family, and they were about to make a spectacular entrance. The penthouse was cold, not in temperature. Richard Sterling insisted on a precise 72 degrees Fahrenheit, but in spirit. It was a monument of glass, steel, and stark white marble that overlooked the city, a fortress of success. For Richard, it was a trophy. For his wife, Linda, it was a beautifully designed prison. Linda Hayes Sterling, 29, was a woman of gentle contradictions. She wore her honey blonde hair in a simple knot, preferred antique books to diamond bracelets, and spoke in a voice that was often drowned out at the boisterous, cutthroat parties her husband threw. To Richard's circle she was the mouse, sweet, pretty, but ultimately insignificant. A background character in the grand opera of Richard's life. Richard, 42, was the star. He was all charisma and capped teeth, a self-made man who'd built Sterling Innovations, a rapidly growing tech logistics firm, from nothing. He loved this narrative. He polished it daily. He conveniently forgot the substantial, anonymous seed money that had mysteriously appeared in his account 8 years ago, jump-starting his entire career. He'd convinced himself it was a market anomaly, a lucky break for a genius like him. Their marriage, now 5 years old, had begun as a whirlwind. Linda, working under her maiden name, Hayes, as a junior archivist at the city library, had been charmed by his ambition. He had been enchanted by her quiet grace and, he admitted to himself, her classic beauty that he could mold. He'd wanted a blank canvas, but the canvas, it turned out, refused to be painted. "Linda, for God's sake, what is that?" Richard's voice boomed from the dressing-room doorway. Linda paused, her hand on a simple, pearl-buttoned blouse. She was packing a small bag for her weekly volunteer shift at the Children's Literacy Center. "It's a shirt, Richard. It's a disgrace," he snapped, adjusting the ludicrously expensive watch on his wrist. "It looks like something a librarian would wear." She blinked, the barb hitting its mark. "I was a librarian, remember?" "Yes. And I elevated you from that," he said, not cruelly, but as a statement of fact. That's what scared her. He truly believed it. "Tonight is the Zenith Gala, Linda. The single biggest night of my career. I'm finalizing the merger with Beaumont's people. And you're packing rags. This isn't for the gala. This is for the center." Richard sighed, a performance of long-suffering patience. "The center. Right. Your little hobby. Look, I've had the emerald green gown from Versace delivered. It's in your closet. The one I pointed out. The one that costs more than your entire former salary." Linda's shoulders tightened. "The green one it's very loud, Richard." "It's statement," he corrected. "We need to make a statement. You need to look like the wife of Richard Sterling, not a startled field mouse who stumbled into a party. Is that clear?" She just nodded, her throat too tight to argue. The fight had left her months, perhaps years ago. She had married him for love, believing his drive was a sign of passion. She had hidden her own background, a decision made from a desperate, youthful desire to be loved for herself, not for her name. Her family, the Landons, were not millionaires in the way Richard was. Richard's wealth was a roaring bonfire, demanding attention, threatening to burn out. The Landon fortune was like the bedrock of the continent. It didn't make noise. It didn't need to. It simply was. It was in the banks, the land, the quiet global holding companies that owned everything from agricultural tech to, unbeknownst to Richard, the very logistics software his innovations were built upon. Linda had made a promise to her father, Arthur Landon, when she'd insisted on this normal life. "Live it for 5 years," he had said, his kind eyes tinged with sadness. "See if the world you've chosen is truly the one you want." But Linda, a man who measures his worth in decibels will never appreciate your silence. The 5 years were up next month, and as Richard threw an empty, branded Sterling Innovations mug into the sink, shattering it, Linda realized her father, as always, had been right. "Clean that up," he ordered, not looking at her. "And be ready at 7. The car can't be late. Not tonight." She watched him stride out, his reflection warring with the city skyline. She knelt, carefully picking up the sharp, white fragments of the mug. She didn't flinch when a sliver of porcelain bit into her thumb, drawing a single, bright red bead of blood. It was a small, sharp pain, a punctuation mark on an afternoon of dull aches. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over a name she hadn't called in 6 months. Julian, her older brother. She typed a simple text. "Gala tonight. He's meeting Beaumont. I think it's going to be bad." The reply was almost instantaneous. "We know. Mr. Beaumont is our man. Stay strong, Ellie. The game is almost over." Linda deleted the exchange, took a steadying breath, and went to look at the garish green dress. The cage, she thought, was about to be opened. The Zenith Gala was a symphony of manufactured importance. It was held in the Sterling Grand Ballroom of a hotel that Richard, just last week, had bragged about, personally saving with his patronage. A string quartet played nervously in the corner, dwarfed by ice sculptures of the Sterling Innovations logo. Linda felt like a fraud, and not just because of her secret. The Versace gown was a prison of emerald sequins, tight and revealing in a way that made her feel exposed and cheap. Richard, in a tailored tux, was a planet of ego, pulling lesser bodies into his orbit. "Richard, darling, you made it!" A woman with a face pulled impos video, S04.MHOAC4. He called her a nobody in front of everyone. Richard Sterling, a man who clawed his way to millionaire status, looked at his wife, Linda, and saw nothing but a simple, plain embarrassment. He did it at the biggest gala of the year, mocking her dress, her common background, and her quiet nature. He told the entire room she was lucky he'd saved her from obscurity. What he didn't know? The room belonged to her. The servers, the building, the bank funding his entire empire. It was all owned by her family, and they were about to make a spectacular entrance. The penthouse was cold. Not in temperature. Richard Sterling insisted on a precise 72 degrees Fahrenheit, but in spirit. It was a monument of glass, steel, and stark white marble that overlooked the city, a fortress of success. For Richard, it was a trophy. For his wife, Linda, it was a beautifully designed prison. Linda Hayes Sterling, 29, was a woman of gentle contradictions. She wore her honey-blonde hair in a simple knot, preferred antique books to diamond bracelets, and spoke in a voice that was often drowned out at the boisterous, cutthroat parties her husband threw. To Richard's circle, she was the mouse. Sweet, pretty, but ultimately insignificant. A background character in the grand opera of Richard's life. Richard, 42, was the star. He was all charisma and capped teeth, a self-made man who'd built Sterling Innovations, a rapidly growing tech logistics firm, from nothing. He loved this narrative. He polished it daily. He conveniently forgot the substantial, anonymous seed money that had mysteriously appeared in his account 8 years ago, jump-starting his entire career. He'd convinced himself it was a market anomaly, a lucky break for a genius like him. Their marriage, now 5 years old, had begun as a whirlwind. Linda, working under her maiden name, Hayes, as a junior archivist at the city library, had been charmed by his ambition. He had been enchanted by her quiet grace and, he admitted to himself, her classic beauty that he could mould. He'd wanted a blank canvas, but the canvas, it turned out, refused to be painted. "Linda, for God's sake, what is that?" Richard's voice boomed from the dressing-room doorway. Linda paused, her hand on a simple, pearl-buttoned blouse. She was packing a small bag for her weekly volunteer shift at the Children's Literacy Center. "It's a shirt, Richard." "It's a disgrace," he snapped, adjusting the ludicrously expensive watch on his wrist. "It looks like something a librarian would wear." She blinked, the barb hitting its mark. "I was a librarian, remember?" "Yes, and I elevated you from that," he said, not cruelly, but as a statement of fact. That's what scared her. He truly believed it. "Tonight is the Zenith Gala, Linda, the single biggest night of my career. I'm finalizing the merger with Beaumont's people, and you're packing rags. This isn't for the gala. This is for the center." Richard sighed, a performance of long-suffering patience. "The center. Right. Your little hobby. Look, I've had the emerald green gown from Versace delivered. It's in your closet, the one I pointed out, the one that costs more than your entire salary." Linda's shoulders tightened. "The green one is... It's very loud, Richard." "It's statement," he corrected. "We need to make a statement. You need to look like the wife of Richard Sterling, not a startled field mouse who stumbled into a party. Is that clear?" She just nodded, her throat too tight to argue. The fight had left her months, perhaps years ago. She had married him for love, believing his drive was a sign of passion. She had hidden her own background, a decision made from a desperate, youthful desire to be loved for herself, not for her name. Her family, the Landons, were not millionaires in the way Richard was. Richard's wealth was a roaring bonfire, demanding attention, threatening to burn out. The Landon fortune was like the bedrock of the continent. It didn't make noise. It didn't need to. It simply was. It was in the banks, the land, the quiet global holding companies that owned everything from agricultural tech to, unbeknownst to Richard, the very logistics software his innovations were built upon. Linda had made a promise to her father, Arthur Landon, when she'd insisted on this normal life. "Live it for 5 years," he had said, his kind eyes tinged with sadness. "See if the world you've chosen is truly the one you want." But Linda, a man who measures his worth in decibels will never appreciate your silence. The 5 years were up next month, and as Richard threw an empty, branded Sterling Innovations mug into the sink, shattering it, Linda realized her father, as always, had been right. "Clean that up," he ordered, not looking at her. "And be ready at 7. The car can't be late. Not tonight." She watched him stride out, his reflection warring with the city skyline. She knelt, carefully picking up the sharp, white fragments of the mug. She didn't flinch when a sliver of porcelain bit into her thumb, drawing a single, bright red bead of blood. It was a small, sharp pain, a punctuation mark on an afternoon of dull aches. She picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over a name she hadn't called in 6 months. Julian, her older brother. She typed a simple text. "Gala tonight. He's meeting Beaumont. I think it's going to be bad." The reply was almost instantaneous. "We know. Mr. Beaumont is our man. Stay strong, Ellie. The game is almost over." Linda deleted the exchange, took a steadying breath, and went to look at the garish green dress. The cage, she thought, was about to be opened. The Zenith Gala was a symphony of manufactured importance. It was held in the sterling grand ballroom of a hotel that Richard, just last week, had bragged about personally saving with his patronage. A string quartet played nervously in the corner, dwarfed by ice sculptures of the Sterling Innovations logo. Linda felt like a fraud, and not just because of her secret. The Versace gown was a prison of emerald sequins, tight and revealing in a way that made her feel exposed and cheap. Richard, in a tailored tux, was a planet of ego, pulling lesser bodies into his orbit. "Richard, darling, you made it." A woman with a face pulled taut by surgery, Clarissa Vane, air-kissed him. Her eyes scanned Linda with undisguised contempt. "And Linda, you came too. That dress is brave." "Clarissa, you look preserved," Linda replied, her voice soft. Clarissa missed the barb and just sniffed. "There he is," Richard muttered, his hand gripping Linda's arm like a vice. "Titus Beaumont, Beaumont Capital. This is it, Linda. Don't say anything stupid. In fact, don't say anything at all. Just smile and look pretty." "I'm not a show dog, Richard," she whispered, pulling her arm away. "You're what I tell you to be," he hissed, his smile never leaving his face as they approached the small group. Titus Beaumont was a man in his late 60s with a perfectly tailored suit and eyes that had seen everything. He was, as Linda knew, one of her father's oldest friends and most trusted board members. He was here tonight to be the bait. "Richard, good to see you," Beaumont boomed, shaking his hand. He then turned to Linda, and his entire demeanor changed. He took her hand gently, bowing his head. "Mrs. Sterling, a profound pleasure. You look radiant." Linda blushed. "Mr. Beaumont, it's lovely to see you again." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Again? You've met?" "Oh, just in passing," Linda said quickly. Richard, already feeling eclipsed, reasserted his dominance. "Titus, let's talk about the merger. We're going to change the world, you and I." "Indeed," Beaumont said, his eyes twinkling. "But tell me, Richard, what do you see as your single greatest asset?" Richard laughed, slinging his arm around Linda's waist and pulling her painfully close. "My greatest asset? Besides my brain? I'd have to say it's my ability to spot potential where no one else can." He gestured not at his company, but at Linda. The small crowd, sensing drama, quieted. "Take my wife, for example," Richard announced, his voice carrying. "Beautiful, isn't she? But when I met her, she was a librarian. Can you believe it? Stamping books for pennies, living in a tiny, sad apartment. She didn't know a thing about the real world." Linda's blood ran cold. She could feel Beaumont's gaze on her, full of concern. She tried to pull away, but Richard's grip was iron. No, it's a success story." Richard laughed, playing to his sycophantic audience. "I taught her everything. How to dress, how to talk, which fork to use. I saved her from a life of, well, nothing. She's my greatest project." The silence was horrifying. Clarissa Vane let out a tittering laugh. "Richard, stop!" Linda's voice was a strained whisper. "Stop? Honey, I'm just getting started. I'm telling them about your humble beginnings. It's inspiring. It shows that anyone, even a little nobody from nowhere, can marry a millionaire and be someone." And then came the final, fatal blow. He turned to Titus Beaumont. "She's the proof of my philosophy, Titus. You find something with no value, you invest just enough to make it shine, and you can put it on display. She's my ultimate trophy." He patted her on the hip, as if she were a prize-winning mare. Linda's face was white, The room was spinning. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, suffocating blanket. She looked at Richard, truly looked at him, and the last embers of her love for him turned to ash. She said nothing. She didn't cry or scream. She simply, very deliberately, removed his hand from her waist. She looked at Titus Beaumont, who was no longer smiling. His face was granite. "Mr. Beaumont," she said, her voice impossibly clear and cold in the sudden hush. "Forgive my husband. He's new to all of this. He often mistakes the price of things for their value." She turned, her back straight, the emerald dress now looking like armor, and walked out of the ballroom. She didn't run. She walked. The sound of her heels on the marble floor was the only sound in the room, a sharp, steady click, click, click. Richard, stunned and furious, went to follow her, but Titus Beaumont put a hand on his chest. "I think," Beaumont said, his voice a low growl, "that you've said quite enough, Mr. Sterling. The meeting is off. In fact, I think all your meetings are off." "What? You can't? That deal was—" "The deal," Beaumont said, "was contingent on you being a man of character. It appears you have a deficit. Good evening." Richard stood, dumbfounded, as Beaumont turned and left. The crowd began to murmur. His night of triumph had just imploded, and it was all her fault. Linda didn't go home. She went to the only other place in the city that felt safe, the St. Regis Hotel. Not the local one Richard frequented, but the one he dismissed as old-fashioned and stuffy. She walked into the lobby, the green Versace dress now a neon sign of her distress. The concierge, an older gentleman named Mr. Peterson, didn't blink. He simply bowed his head. "Miss Landon, it's good to see you. Your usual suite is ready. We've been expecting you." "Thank you, Peterson," she said, the name Landon feeling strange and familiar on her tongue. "Your brother, Mr. Julian, is waiting for you in the lounge. He instructed me to send up a change of clothes and a pot of your preferred oolong tea." Relief washed over her so powerfully, her knees almost buckled. Julian. She found him by the fire, reading the Wall Street Journal as if it were 2 p.m., not nearly midnight. Julian Landon was the opposite of Richard. Where Richard was a storm, Julian was the mountain. He was tall, dressed in a simple, perfectly cut grey suit, and had their father's calm, assessing eyes. He was the CEO of Landon Global Holdings, the invisible conglomerate that held the world's puppet strings. He folded the paper as she approached. "Ellie." She didn't speak. She just fell into his arms, and the tears she had held back finally came. He held her, patting her back, letting her cry. "He's a fool, Ellie," he murmured. "A loud, arrogant, and irredeemably stupid fool." He said I was a nobody," she choked out. "His project." "I know. I heard," Julian said. "Beaumont had an open line. The entire board meeting tomorrow morning heard, including father. Mother. Well, mother is now deciding which of his assets to liquidate first. I believe she's starting with his collection of tacky sports cars." Linda pulled back, wiping her eyes. "You heard? All of you? We had to be sure, Ellie. We had to let you see him for what he was, without our interference. That was your rule. 5 years." He checked his watch. "And as of 12:01 a.m., that contract of non-interference is officially null and void." He handed her a silk handkerchief. "Now go upstairs. Change your clothes. Get some sleep. The family jet lands at 7 a.m. Father and mother are flying in. And he smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. "I'm going to work." "What are you going to do?" "Me? Oh, just make a few phone calls. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you own the bank. All of the banks." Back at the gala, Richard was apoplectic. He stormed back to the penthouse, shouting Linda's name. The apartment was empty, save for the shards of the broken mug he'd left in the sink. He threw his phone against the wall, cracking the screen. He poured a large scotch, his mind racing. Beaumont was a temporary setback. He'd smooth it over. But Linda, how dare she humiliate him? How dare she walk out? His phone rang. A new one. It was his COO, Ben. "Richard, thank God, what the hell is going on?" Ben sounded panicked. "What are you talking about? I'm handling the Beaumont." "To hell with Beaumont. Richard, our primary credit line at First National just got frozen. I mean, frozen. Lock, stock, and barrel." Richard's blood chilled. "What? They can't do that. We have a $50 million revolving credit." "They just did. The reason given was material risk exposure due to leadership instability." "What does that even mean?" Richard's hand was shaking. "It's a mistake, a clerical error. I'll call Greg at the bank tomorrow." "You can't. Greg was fired an hour ago, and that's not all. Our 3 biggest shipping providers just terminated their contracts, all at once, all citing breach of ethics clauses we didn't even know were in there. Richard, we can't move a single piece of product. We're dead in the water. What did you do tonight?" Richard sank onto a white leather couch. The Sterling Grand Ballroom, the hotel chain, First National Bank, the shipping companies. It was all connected. But how? He remembered Linda's strange, cold calm. Her words to Beaumont. He often mistakes the price of things for their value. He had a sudden, terrible premonition. This wasn't a business problem, this was Linda. But how? She was a librarian. She was a nobody. Wasn't she? Richard Sterling didn't sleep. He spent the night pacing his glass box in the sky, a caged animal. His empire, which had felt so indestructible 12 hours earlier, was crumbling. By 6 a.m. he had lost his bank, his logistics, and his entire supply chain. His stock, which wasn't even public yet, was effectively worthless. He was on a frantic call with his legal team when his private elevator dinged. He'd given no one access. He stormed into the foyer, ready to scream at the concierge, and froze. A man and a woman stood there, flanked by 2 other men in severe black suits. They were not corporate raiders. They looked like royalty. The man, Arthur Landon, was in his late 60s, with a shock of silver hair and a face that could have been carved from Mount Rushmore. He wore a simple tweed jacket, but he radiated an authority that made Richard's $10,000 suit feel like a cheap costume. The woman, Catherine Landon, was tall, elegant, and terrifying. Her pearls looked more expensive than Richard's car, and her eyes, the same shade of blue as Linda's, were currently dissecting him with surgical precision. "Who the hell are you?" Richard blustered. "This is a private residence." "Is it?" Catherine Landon's voice was like cut glass. "It's very sterile. You must be Richard, the self-made man." "Get out of my home," Richard said, reaching for his phone to call security. "I wouldn't bother," Arthur Landon said, his voice a calm baritone. "We own the building's security firm, just as we own the building itself, and the land it's built on. And, as of 7:01 a.m. this morning, the delinquent mortgage you took out against it." Richard's hand froze. What did you say?" "I am Arthur Landon. This is my wife, Catherine. We are here to see our daughter." Richard's brain short-circuited. "Your daughter? I don't know any Landons." "That," Catherine said, stepping forward, "is abundantly clear. You married Linda Hayes Landon, you insufferable little climbing boy. And for 5 years, you have been living off the scraps of our family's patience. Linda Landon." Richard's world tilted. He remembered her maiden name, Hayes. Her mother's maiden name, Arthur supplied, as if discussing the weather. It was her idea to live simply, to see if she could find a man who wasn't blinded by the name Landon. A noble, if naive, experiment. And you, Mr. Sterling, are the spectacularly failed result. Richard was suffocating. I loved her. Catherine laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You loved her. You humiliated her. You called her a nobody. You, a man whose entire company was built on a single anonymous investment from our venture capital fund, dared to call our daughter a project. The seed money, Richard whispered. That was... you? A test, Arthur said, walking past him to look out the window. A $10 million test to see what you would build. We were unimpressed. You built all this? He gestured to the garish apartment. A shrine to yourself. You produce nothing of value. You're a middleman, Richard, and we are cutting you out. The elevator dinged again. This time it was Linda. She was not the mouse who had left last night. The Versace dress was gone. She wore a simple navy blue sheath dress. Her hair was coiled in a tight professional bun, and her eyes were clear and hard. She was flanked by her brother, Julian, and Titus Beaumont. She looked at Richard, at the sweat on his brow, the panic in his eyes, and she felt nothing. Just a cold, quiet pity. Linda! Thank God! Richard lunged toward her. Ellie, baby, you have to tell them. It's a misunderstanding. I love you. I was stressed. I said stupid things. Julian put a hand on Richard's chest, stopping him. Don't touch my sister. Linda, Arthur said, turning from the window. Are you all right? I am, Father, she said, her voice steady. Linda, please, Richard begged. This is our life, our home. Linda looked around the cold white room. This was never my home, Richard. This was your stage, and the play is over. What happens now? He whispered, his bravado finally shattering. Now, Julian said, stepping forward and opening a briefcase. We go to your office. You've called an emergency 8 a.m. board meeting. We're all going to attend. My board, Richard said, confused. No, Richard, Linda said, walking to the door. My board. The Sterling Innovations boardroom was a state of chaos. The 6 board members Richard had hand-picked, mostly old golfing buddies and yes-men, were shouting, looking at their phones and sweating through their shirts. Richard, what is this? First National is gone. The stock is... The doors to the boardroom slid open. Richard walked in, his face ashen. He was followed by Julian, Arthur, Catherine, Titus Beaumont, and finally, Linda. Richard, who are these people? His COO, Ben, demanded. Ladies, gentlemen, please take your seats, Julian Landon said, taking the head of the table as if he owned it, which of course he did. Who the hell are you? Ben snapped. My name is Julian Landon. I am the CEO of Landon Global Holdings. This is our founder, Arthur Landon, our chief counsel, Catherine Landon, and our senior board member, Titus Beaumont. The names dropped into the room like lead weights. Landon Global. Even these men, insular as they were, had heard of Landon Global. It wasn't a company. It was a myth, a private equity beast that owned countries. Landon. Global. Ben looked at Richard, who was staring at the water carafe as if it held the answers to the universe. We are, to put it simply, your new management, Julian continued. As of 8 a.m., Landon Global has acquired a 100% stake in Sterling Innovations. You can't, a board member squeaked. It's a private company. We didn't vote. Oh, but you did, Catherine said, pulling a file from her briefcase. Landon Global, through various subsidiaries, including Mr. Beaumont's firm, has been the silent majority partner in this venture since its inception. We owned 85% of your private company. The initial $10 million investment was ours. The credit line at First National, our bank, was ours. The technology you innovated was licensed from a German firm we own. We just let Richard think he was in charge. She slid a document across the table. This morning, we simply exercised the key man clause in our contract, which stipulates that in the event of gross mismanagement, moral turpitude, or leadership failure, we can assume total control. I believe, she smiled sweetly, Mr. Sterling's performance at the gala last night more than qualifies. The board members looked at Richard with pure, unadulterated hatred. He had sunk them all. And now, Julian said, we have the matter of the new leadership. I can stay on, Richard stammered, a desperate, pathetic plea. I'll be a consultant, I'll do anything. Julian looked at Linda. Ellie? Linda stood up. She walked to the large Sterling Innovations logo, etched into the glass wall behind the head of the table. My name, she said, her voice resonating with a power the board had never heard, is Linda Hayes Landon. I am the daughter of Arthur and Catherine Landon. I am the woman my husband called a nobody last night. She turned to face them. This company was a test. It was an experiment, and it has failed. But my family does not believe in waste. We believe in restructuring. As the new chairwoman and CEO of this company, my first act is to accept the immediate resignation of Mr. Richard Sterling. Richard looked like he'd been shot. Chairwoman. Linda, you're a librarian. I have a master's degree in information science and a bachelor's in economics from Yale, Linda said coolly. I chose to work at a library because I believe in public access to knowledge, a concept I'm sure you find quaint. She looked at the board. The rest of you are also fired, effective immediately. Your severance will be the minimum required by law. Security will escort you out. Please leave your company phones and laptops. The yes men were stunned. They couldn't believe it was happening. This is my company, Richard finally roared, finding his voice. I built this. You can't just... We can, Arthur Landon said, standing up. And we have. The name Sterling Innovations will be dissolved by noon. This company and all its assets will be absorbed into the Landon global family under a new division. A new division? Ben asked, dazed. Linda nodded. Yes, it will be refocused on ethical, sustainable logistics and technology, and it will be called the Hayes Initiative, after my mother's family. She looked directly at Richard, her eyes holding no anger, only finality. You see, Richard, you were right. You did find something, ignored its value, and tried to put it on display. But I am not your trophy. I am your owner. The fallout was not loud. It was silent and absolute. The reckoning for Richard Sterling wasn't a fiery explosion. It was the slow, crushing pressure of the deep ocean. The board members were escorted out first, carrying their sad little boxes of personal effects. Richard was last. He stood in the lobby of the building he once thought of as his, a single security guard at his elbow. He had nothing. The company car was gone. The company credit cards were blocks of useless plastic. He took a taxi back to the penthouse. His key fob didn't work. The elevator wouldn't open. Mr. Sterling, the concierge, a man he'd never bothered to learn the name of, said, not looking up from his screen. I'm afraid your residency here has been terminated. Terminated? I own this. No, sir. You were a tenant on a corporate lease. That lease was cancelled 1 hour ago. Your personal effects are being packed as we speak and will be delivered to a storage facility. You have 10 minutes to retrieve any personal medication. A new tenant is moving in this afternoon. A new tenant? Who? The elevator doors opened, and Linda walked out, followed by her mother. Catherine was directing 2 men who were removing a particularly ugly, abstract sculpture from the wall. This is illegal," Richard shouted, his voice cracking. "You can't do this. We're married." Linda paused and turned to him. She was holding a single, slim file. "Actually, Richard, we're not. Of all the blows, this one hit him the hardest." "What? What are you talking about?" "Our prenup," Linda said, tapping the file. "The one your high-priced lawyer drafted. The one you made me sign, telling me it was just a formality to protect your assets. It protects me. It says what's mine is mine," he said, a frantic, wild look in his eyes. "Exactly," Catherine said, stepping forward. "It also contains, in Section 11, Paragraph 4, a humiliation clause. A rather obscure old money clause that my father insisted on adding to all our family's marital contracts." "A humiliation clause?" "It states," Linda read, her voice monotone, "that in the event one party publicly, willfully, and maliciously disparages, demeans, or humiliates the other for social or financial gain, the contract is rendered void, and all shared assets, titles, and claims are immediately forfeited by the offending party." Richard's face was white. But, you called me a nobody, a project, a trophy, in front of Mr. Beaumont, who, as it turns out, is a notary public and was a signatory witness to this very document. Your performance last night, Richard, didn't just cost you a deal. It cost you everything. "The penthouse," he whispered. "It was in both our names." "Bought with a joint account," Linda said. "Funded by my trust, which means it's now my penthouse. The cars were leased through the company. The art was on loan from a Landon-owned gallery. Your watch," she pointed, "was a gift from me, which means it's one of the few things you actually get to keep. But the bank accounts, Richard, all the joint accounts, are now mine." He was, in an instant, poorer than he was the day he met her. He wasn't just back at zero. He was in a hole so deep he'd never see sunlight again. You planned this," he accused, his voice a pathetic rasp. "No, Richard," Linda said, her voice full of a sudden, immense sadness. "You did. I planned to love you. I planned to build a life with you. I planned to tell you the truth on our 5th anniversary and laugh about it. You planned this. You built this cage for me, and in the end, you're the one who got trapped inside it." She handed him a single piece of paper. It wasn't the file. It was a check. "What's this?" "It's $5,000, she said. "The exact amount I had in my savings account the day I met you. I don't want to be accused of leaving you with nothing. That was your move." She turned and walked back to the elevator, not looking back. The doors closed, leaving Richard Sterling alone in the lobby of a building he no longer belonged in. A self-made man, finally, and truly undone. 6 months later, the 50th floor boardroom was unrecognizable. The heavy, dark mahogany and black leather that Richard Sterling had favored, a style designed to intimidate and dominate, had been ripped out. In its place were walls of smart glass, light maple tables, and ergonomic chairs in a soft, welcoming blue. The imposing, aggressive Sterling Innovations logo, etched into the glass, had been replaced by the elegant, understated script of the Hayes Initiative. The room was full, but the faces were new. The air, once thick with sycophantic tension and cigar smoke, was bright with collaborative energy. At the head of the table stood Linda Hayes Landon. The transformation was absolute. The mouse, who had hidden behind books and a quiet demeanor, was gone. The trophy wife, in the too tight Versace dress, was a ghost. This woman was a synthesis of both, and something more. Her honey blonde hair was cut into a sharp, professional bob. She wore a simple, perfectly tailored cream-colored pantsuit, her only jewelry the practical watch her father had given her for her graduation from Yale. Her eyes, once downcast, now scanned the room with a calm, penetrating intelligence. And that, Linda concluded, tapping the interactive screen, is why the second chapter program is non-negotiable. Our profits are up 40% from the new sustainable logistics fleet, which is fantastic. But this company is no longer just about profit. It's about purpose. A hand went up. It was Mark, a new logistics manager she'd poached from a larger, more ruthless competitor. He was brilliant, but still skeptical of her soft approach. "Ms. Landon," he began, "I'm all for the PR value of the literacy program, but dedicating 5% of prime ground floor square footage in all 15 of our new distribution hubs, that's a significant hit to our potential leasing revenue. The old model—" Linda held up a hand, silencing him without a trace of malice. "The old model, Mark, was a shell game. It was a brand without a product, leveraged against debt we didn't need. It was hollow. I am building a company with bones. The Hayes Initiative is not just our name. It's our directive." She walked over to the smart glass wall, which overlooked the city. "The second chapter program does two things. First, it offers free literacy and GED courses to our employees and their families. This improves retention, loyalty, and creates a more skilled workforce. Our employee turnover has dropped 22% in 6 months. That alone offsets the lost leasing revenue. Do the math." Mark, a man of numbers, began to look intrigued rather than argumentative. "Second," Linda continued, her voice softening, "it's who we are. I started my career in a library. I saw firsthand what happens when people are given the tools to write their own stories. We are a logistics company. We move things, but that can include moving people forward." She looked at him directly. "We are not just a company that moves boxes, Mark. We are a company that moves communities. Any other questions?" The room was silent. Mark leaned back in his chair and, for the first time, smiled. "No, Mum, that was clear. And impressive?" Titus Beaumont, who had gleefully accepted a permanent advisory role on her board, winked at her from the end of the table. "Well done, Chairwoman." Later that day, Linda bypassed the executive elevator. It was a habit she'd formed. She wanted to walk the floors. She wanted to be seen, not as a remote concept of the boss, as Richard had been, but as a present and active part of the team. The building itself had been transformed. The cold, sterile lobby of white marble and steel, once home to a garish, abstract sculpture Richard had paid a fortune for, was now a vibrant, open space. The sculpture was gone, replaced by a massive, living green wall of plants. The cold marble was warmed by wooden benches and soft lighting. And in the very spot where Richard's sculpture had stood, there was now a sprawling, beautiful children's and adults' library, the flagship of the second chapter program. She saw a young woman, one of the company's new data analysts, sitting on a bench, reading a picture book to her toddler. Linda paused, a genuine smile touching her lips. This was value. This was the empire she wanted to build. "Miss Landon?" Linda turned. It was her new COO, a sharp woman named Anita. "The numbers on the second chapter are—" "You were right. I've never seen a retention spike like this. How did you know?" "Because," Linda said, watching the mother turn the page, "my husband, My ex-husband thought I was just a simple librarian. He thought it was a worthless, nobody job. He never understood that a librarian isn't just someone who stamps books. A librarian is a curator of knowledge, a guardian of stories, and a distributor of information. It was the best possible training to run a logistics empire. He just couldn't see the value. Anita nodded, processing that. Well, his loss, in every conceivable way. As Anita walked off, Linda's phone buzzed. It was a text from her brother, Julian, which means he's ecstatic. Mother wants to know if you're coming for dinner on Sunday. She's making the osso buco. Linda smiled and typed a quick reply. She put her phone away, feeling a sense of integrated peace she hadn't known was possible. She was not her father's daughter, or her brother's sister, or Richard's wife. She was Linda. And for the first time, that was more than enough. It was late when she finally left, well past 8. The lobby was quiet, the last of the evening classes in the library letting out. Her driver, a kind, middle-aged woman named Maria, was waiting for her outside. Linda was gathering her briefcase when the automatic doors slid open, and a man in a rumpled, bright orange food delivery uniform rushed in, fumbling a large, insulated bag. He was muttering to himself, his head down. No, late. He's gonna one-star me. Just, please. He was heading for the concierge desk when he stumbled, and a plastic container of soup fell out of the unzipped bag, splattering on the floor. Damn it all, he hissed, his voice cracking with a desperate, familiar frustration. He dropped to his knees, frantically trying to scoop the congealing soup back into the container with his hands. Sir? Linda said, stepping forward. It's all right. Let me get someone to... The man froze. His head snapped up. The lobby lights were dim, but they were bright enough to illuminate the hollowed-out, gaunt face of Richard Sterling. He was thin. Shockingly so. The tailored suit was replaced by a cheap, stained polo shirt with a Dash Eats logo. His hair was thinning, his skin was sallow, and his eyes, once so full of fire and arrogant self-regard, were now just empty, hollowed-out pits of shame and exhaustion. He scrambled backward, away from her, as if she were the monster. Linda, Mrs. Landon, Ma'am, I... He looked at the mess, his panic rising. I'll clean it. I'm sorry. Please don't complain. My rating, I can't lose this job. Linda stood perfectly still. The man who had called her a project was on his hands and knees, terrified she would give him a bad review. The man who had humiliated her in a room full of billionaires was now begging her not to complain to an app. She had pictured this moment. In the early days, she had fantasized about it. She'd imagined herself in a new Versace gown, him in rags. She'd imagined a speech, a cold, cutting monologue, where she would list his every sin and watch him crumble. But now, standing here, looking at the pathetic ruin of the man who had been the architect of her deepest misery, she felt nothing. Not anger. Not triumph. Not even pity. It was the chilling, absolute detachment of a historian looking at a closed case. He was no longer a person to her. He was an event, a chapter she had finished reading and shelved away. Richard, she said. Her voice was calm, not cold, not warm, just a voice. It made him flinch. I'm in a program, he stammered, pulling himself up, wiping his soiled hands on his pants. It was a pathetic, desperate attempt to regain any footing, a 12-step, for arrogance, compulsive, capitalism. They call it... I don't know what they call it, but I'm working the steps. I am. Are you? Linda said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I'm on step 9. Making amends. His eyes darted to her, then to the floor. And I I'm sorry, Linda. I know I'm sorry. For all of it. I was a fool. I was a monster. Linda looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the truth. He was sorry. He was sorry he'd been caught. He was sorry he'd lost. He was sorry he was on his knees cleaning up spilled soup. The reason for his actions, she doubted he'd ever truly understand that. She could have destroyed him. Her brother Julian had wanted to. He'd wanted to blacklist him so thoroughly he couldn't get a job sweeping streets. But Linda had called him off. No, she'd said. His ego is his prison. Let him live in it. Let him be a nobody. Let's see what he builds. And this, apparently, was the answer. Nothing. She reached into her purse. He cringed, thinking she was pulling out her phone to complain. Instead, she just stood. Amends are not for the person giving them, Richard, she said, her voice quiet but carrying in the empty lobby. They're for the person receiving them, and I have to tell you, I don't need them. We are settled. That, she saw, was the true final blow. Not her power, not her money, but her indifference. The fact that he no longer had any hold on her, not even in anger. He was, finally and truly, irrelevant. She bent down, not to him, but to the rest of the delivery bag he'd dropped. She picked it up and looked at the ticket. Who is this for? The new tenant, he whispered. The penthouse. I have to take it up. The irony was so thick, so bitter, Linda almost laughed. The penthouse, her gilded cage, had been empty for months. She couldn't bear to sell it, nor to live in it. So she had given it to the Hayes Initiative. The penthouse, Linda said, handing the bag back to him, is now the Hayes Foundation Arts Residency. The new tenant is a brilliant young sculptor from inner-city Detroit. She's here on a full 2-year grant. Richard's face, already pale, turned the color of ash. He had to go up. He had to go to the home he'd lost, the symbol of his entire empire, as a servant, to deliver a meal to the kind of person he'd once mocked. He took the bag, his hand shaking so violently he almost dropped it again. Linda, Be well, Richard. She said it with the same finality as a judge passing a sentence. She turned, her back straight, and walked out of the automatic doors into the cool night air. Her driver, Maria, held the car door open. Good evening, Miss Landon. Productive day. Linda paused before getting in. She looked up. The penthouse, once a dark monument to one man's ego, was now blazing with light. She could see the tenant, the young sculptor, working on a massive piece, the light from her welding torch flickering like a star. Linda had not just escaped the cage. She had not just destroyed the man who built it. She had repurposed it. She had taken the very symbol of her oppression and turned it into a beacon of hope and creativity. She got into the car. Yes, Maria, she said, a small, genuine smile finally gracing her lips. A very productive day. As the car pulled away, she didn't look back. She was not just the owner of a building or a company. She was, at last, the owner of her own story. And just like that, the tables didn't just turn. They were flipped over, dismantled, and sold for parts. Linda's story is a powerful reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. What did you think of Richard's downfall? Was it karma, or was it pure, cold-blooded business? We read all of your comments, so let us know your favorite part of Linda's revenge down below. If you love stories where the underdog holds the ultimate power, do us a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs to see that true power isn't about being the loudest. Most importantly, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss another real-life drama from our collection. We have a new story coming soon, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Subscribe now and witness how an arrogant man loses absolutely everything on the night of his absolute triumph by underestimating the woman he thought he had discarded. Act 1. The Trial at the Museum. The cold, polished marble of the grand ballroom not only reflected the light of thousands of crystals, but also the moment a man's entire world shattered. Arthur Sterling believed he had orchestrated the perfect life. He had discarded his quiet, simple ex-wife, Ilara, as if she were a passé trend, and now arrived at the year's most exclusive event, the Beaumont Foundation Gala, with his dazzling new mistress, Serafina, on his arm. He was ready to consolidate his status among the elite, but he forgot a crucial rule of high society. The most powerful pieces on the board are often the ones that move in silence. The air in the Goya Hall was not just air. It was a pressurized substance, dense with the aroma of old money, the lineage, new ambition, the foreign investors, and the intoxicating perfume of 1,000 jasmines. The annual Beaumont Foundation Gala was, without question, the crown jewel of the New York social calendar. To be invited meant you were somebody. To be ignored meant you were the rest of the world. Ilara Vance, for the first time in 6 years, was somebody again. She had arrived alone, her name a discreet addition to the guest list, secured not by her past connection to the man whose name was carved in marble on the building's exterior, but by her own quiet, multi-million-dollar donation. She wore a simple midnight blue gown from a young designer no one knew yet, and her only jewelry was the vintage sapphire earrings left to her by her grandmother. She was elegant, restrained, and completely invisible. Until she wasn't. Arthur Sterling presided over the scene near the immense canvas of Las Meninas, a bronze pharaoh in a tailored suit. Clinging to his arm was Serafina Hayes, his new wife of 6 months. Serafina was a cyclone of blinding white feathers and Cartier diamonds, every one of her movements calculated for the lens of Hello magazine. Ilara had tried to avoid them. She had made her donation, exchanged pleasantries with the museum director, and planned a quiet exit, but Serafina had spotted her. Like a panther stalking a fawn, her eyes narrowed, and a cruel, beautiful smile spread across her face. She glided toward her, dragging Arthur in tow. "Ilara, I barely recognized you. You look so simple. It's brave," Serafina cooed, her French accent lilting with mockery. Ilara inclined her head. "Serafina. Arthur. Arthur, darling, isn't she brave?" Serafina continued, letting her hand settle protectively over her slightly bulging abdomen, news that had flooded the tabloids that very morning. The air crackled. Serafina leaned in, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, yet loud enough for the small circle of nearby donors and reporters to overhear. "I feel so blessed," Serafina said, stroking the bump, "to be able to give Arthur what he's always deserved, a legacy, an heir. It's the most important thing a woman can do, isn't it?" Ilara's face remained a mask of polite indifference. "I believe there are many ways to build a legacy, Serafina." Serafina laughed, a crystalline, brittle sound. "Oh, of course, for those who can't do it naturally." She looked Ilara up and down with a flash of feigned pity in her eyes. "Your life must be so silent. So much time, so much money, and no little heirs to show for it. It's a shame you could never give him this." She paused dramatically. "Some women are just incomplete." The words hung suspended, a deliberate, poisonous strike. Everyone present held their breath. They all knew the story, or the story Arthur had sold them, the tragic, barren first wife. Ilara's eyes did not go to Serafina. They locked onto Arthur. She expected him, the man she had known for 2 decades, the man she had elevated, the man she had protected, to stop this, to show a shred of decency. Arthur Sterling met her gaze, and a flicker of something crossed his eyes. Annoyance? No, it was recognition. And then he did the one thing that would seal his fate. He laughed. It was a small sound, a dismissive, condescending puff of air. He embraced Serafina's waist and pulled her closer. "Be nice, darling," he murmured, loud enough for all to hear. "It's not her fault she's barren." The word barren echoed. It wasn't a whisper. It was a sentence. The small crowd visibly relaxed. The king had spoken. The joke was permitted. The ex-wife was fair game. But Ilara Vance did not cry. She did not flush with shame. A strange, glacial calm settled over her. The pain that had lived in her chest for years did not dissipate. It crystallized. It went from a dull ache to a hard diamond point. She looked at Serafina, the shallow, cruel girl who thought she had won. Then she looked at Arthur, the man who had just confirmed he was a coward. She smiled, a tiny, cold smile that did not reach her eyes. "You are going to regret that laugh, Arthur," she said, her voice clear and low, cutting through the murmurs. "Both of you." She did not wait for a response. Head held high, she turned and walked away, her simple dress flowing behind her like the robes of a queen. She swept past Carmen Torres, the star reporter for Hello magazine, who was furiously scribbling in her notebook, having completely forgotten about fashion. Arthur Sterling watched her go, a flicker of unease beneath his bravado. But Serafina just laughed again, louder this time. What's she going to do? Write a sad poem about it? In his arrogance, Arthur had forgotten the first rule of his own success. Ilara Vance never bluffed, and she never, ever lost. Act 2. The truth behind the lie. The drive back to her penthouse was silent. Her chauffeur, a man who had been with her for 10 years, knew better than to ask if she had a good night. Ilara didn't go to bed. She walked into her study, a room overlooking Central Park, whose walls were lined not with art, but with architectural blueprints and framed patents. She poured a single glass of Ron Zacapa XO, sat in her leather chair, and let the mask drop. The tears that flowed were not for the insult. They were for the fool she had been. Barren. The word was a lie, a thick, suffocating blanket of a lie she had woven herself, a lie she had agreed to wear like a shroud to protect him. Her mind flashed back 12 years. They weren't Arthur Sterling, the Titan, and Ilara, the discreet wife. Back then, they were just Arthur and Ellie, working out of a rented garage in Palo Alto. He was the salesman, the visionary with the $1 million smile. She was the brain. Ilara Vance wasn't just a socialite. She held dual degrees from the Politecnico di Milano in structural engineering and computer science, the core technology that Sterling Construction was built upon. A revolutionary biosynthetic material now found in everything from the city's newest skyscrapers to defense drones. Wasn't Arthur's. It was hers. It stemmed from her postgraduate thesis. He had convinced her to put the company in his name. "It looks better," he had said. "A strong man out front. We're a team, Ellie. What's mine is yours. She had believed him, and as the company grew, she had retreated, letting him take the credit. She loved the work, not the spotlight. Then came the desire for a family, or more accurately, Arthur's desire for an heir. They tried for 2 years. Nothing. Then came the appointments, the sterile, white rooms of the fertility clinics, the invasive questions, the pitying looks from the nurses. Ilara remembered the exact moment the lie began. A consultation at the Dexius Clinic in Barcelona. Dr. Elena Cruz, the country's top reproductive endocrinologist. The folder with the test results. Cruz hadn't looked at Ilara. She had looked at Arthur. The test results are conclusive, Dr. Cruz had said softly. Mrs. Sterling, your fertility is perfectly normal. Excellent, in fact. Arthur had smiled with a "I knew it" self-satisfaction until the doctor continued. Mr. Sterling, the problem is not your wife. Your tests show extreme complications. Azoospermia, 0 viable count. It is congenital. She paused. To be clear, Mr. Sterling, you are biologically sterile. You can never father children. Ilara remembered the silence, the sound of the wall clock. Tick-tock, tick-tock. She felt relief. It wasn't her. After years of feeling like a failure, it wasn't her. But Arthur. Arthur had shattered. His arrogance, his swagger, all dissolved. He didn't see a medical diagnosis. He saw an invalidation. That's impossible, he had hissed. Your test is wrong. Run it again. We ran it 3 times, Mr. Sterling. This can't get out, Arthur had stammered, pale. My father, my board, they see me as a leader. This would ruin me. A Sterling who can't produce an heir. It's a joke. Ilara had watched the man she loved dissolve into a paranoid, terrified boy. He had looked at her, his eyes pleading. Ellie, please. No one can know. This will destroy the company. It will destroy us. And in that moment, she had made the choice that would define her life. She had taken his hand. They won't know, she had said. It's me. I will take the blame. I'm the one who can't. She had sacrificed her reputation, her truth, her very identity to shield his fragile ego. Their divorce, years later, was a quiet, amicable affair. The narrative was already established. Arthur desperately wanted a family, and the poor, barren Ilara couldn't give him one. He had been generous in the settlement, but the settlement was the second lie. Ilara hadn't wanted his money. She had wanted her freedom, but she wasn't foolish. She held a crucial piece of leverage, the original patents for her biosynthetic technology. She agreed to license the core patents to Sterling Construction for a nominal fee. The license was tied, inextricably, to a 20-page ironclad, non-disparagement and confidentiality agreement. He could never speak of his condition. She could never speak of hers. She paid him to shut up. She paid him to take the blame. And tonight, with a laugh, with a word, barren, in front of a Hello magazine reporter, he had broken the contract unilaterally. Ilara finished her rum. The ice clinked in the empty glass. The pain was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. He hadn't just mocked her. He hadn't just called her barren. He had set her free. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. It rang once. Marcus, she said, her voice steady. It's Ilara. Wake up. We have work to do. Pause for interaction. Do you think Ilara did the right thing by taking the blame to protect Arthur? Or was her sacrifice the root of her own pain? Leave your opinion on Ilara's sacrifice in the comments. Act 3. Serafina's Trap. Serafina Hayes. Sterling admired her reflection in the surface of her penthouse elevator. The diamonds, the dress, the glow of pregnancy. Everything was perfect. She had won. She had vanquished the ghost of Ilara Vance. She swept into their immense apartment, kicking off her Louboutins. Arthur was already at the bar, pouring a stiff brandy. "Well, that was fun," Serafina chirped, kissing his cheek. "Did you see her face? I thought she was going to turn to dust." "You went a little far, don't you think?" Arthur growled, not looking at her. The unease he had felt at the gala was growing. Ilara was not reactive. Her quiet, "You are going to regret that," felt less like a threat and more like a weather forecast. "Nonsense, darling," Serafina said, running her hands over his shoulders. She needed to be put in her place. Everyone needed to see that I am the present, and she is the pathetic past. I am the one giving you a child, the sterling heir. Arthur softened, his hand going to her stomach. The heir. Yes, that's all that matters. Serafina smiled, but it was a wolf's smile. She wasn't just a trophy wife. She was an opportunist who had been waiting her whole life for such a big score. But her victory rested on a far more dangerous lie than Ilara's. Serafina was pregnant, but the child was not Arthur's. The real father was currently sitting on the Sterling construction board, watching his cousin with a hungry patience. Julian Sterling, Arthur's younger, shrewder, and far more ruthless cousin. Serafina's affair with Julian had begun 6 months before she ever met Arthur. Julian was her long game. Arthur was just the shortcut. The plan was simple and brutal. Julian knew Arthur's secret. He had been investigating for years for leverage and had found a disgruntled former assistant who recalled the silenced medical crisis years ago. He suspected the sterility. "You are the Trojan horse, Serafina," Julian had told her in a stolen moment on the Riviera. "Get him to marry you. Get pregnant with my child. He will be so desperate for an heir he'll never question the timeline. He'll announce it to the world. And once he does, he's trapped." The plan was for Serafina to discover Arthur's infertility after the baby was born, declare the child a miracle from a sperm donor she had used out of desperation, and paint Arthur as a monster for lying to her. In the ensuing chaos, Julian would trigger a no-confidence vote on the board, using Arthur's fraud as leverage, and take over the company. The baby, their baby, would be the sterling heir, and he and Serafina would control the entire fortune. But tonight, Serafina had gotten cocky. The gala, the public humiliation of Ilara, that had been her idea, a spontaneous, petty power play. "She is irrelevant, Arthur," Serafina insisted, refilling his glass. "She's a sad, childless woman who designs buildings or whatever. She's nothing. We are everything." Arthur drank, the brandy burning his throat. He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. He had built his entire identity on being the strong one, the fertile one, the king. Ilara's silent sacrifice had been the very foundation of his empire. He had just smashed it with a hammer. Meanwhile, across town, Serafina's phone vibrated. A text message from a blocked number. "Idiot! You didn't just poke the bear, you poked the dragon. This was not the plan. Fix it." It was from Julian. Serafina's blood ran cold. She looked at Arthur, who was now staring out the window, lost in his own uncertain thoughts. She had thought she was playing him, but standing there, in her $1 million dress, A chill went through her. What if Ilara wasn't the only ghost in this penthouse? What if, in her haste to win a small, petty battle, she had just started a war she wasn't prepared for? She wanted to be the queen. She was starting to suspect she was only a pawn. Act 4, the Foundation's revocation. He didn't just breach the contract, Marcus. He voided it. Ilara was seated in the glass-walled conference room of Marcus Thorne's law firm. It was 3 a.m. The table was covered with a copy of her original licensing agreement, her divorce settlement, and a single grainy video from the gala that was already circulating on gossip blogs. Marcus Thorne, a man who charged $2,000 an hour and was worth every penny, pressed a button. A large screen lit up, showing the video. Serafina, the incomplete gesture. Arthur. Laughter. It's not her fault she's barren. Marcus, a man who had seen corporate titans gutted over a single misplaced comma, steepled his hands. He said the word, barren, in public, in front of hello. Reporter Carmen Torres, no less. That is a clear breach of Section 4, Subclause A, the Non-Disparagement Covenant. Exactly, Ilara said, her voice devoid of emotion. And Section 12, Clause C. Which states, Marcus read, a slow smile spreading across his face. It says, a breach of the Non-Disparagement Covenant by either party voids all associated agreements, including the 2018 Sterling Vance Patent Licensing Agreement. At the non-breaching party's discretion, he looked up, feeling the full weight of her words. Ilara, the Sterling Vance Patent License. That's not just a patent. That is the patent. The Vance synth material. It is the core technology for 92% of Sterling Construction's product line. It is the material for his new defense contracts, the Alcazar line. It is the nucleus of his entire €80 billion valuation, Ilara stated, as if commenting on the weather. Marcus leaned back. My God, Ilara, you licensed it to him? Why? For €1 a year, and his silence, and he just, with a laugh, handed it all back to you. Marcus began to pace, his mind buzzing. He didn't just insult you, Ilara. He just committed corporate suicide. What do you want to do? This was the moment. She could sue him for damages, take a massive settlement, ruin him in the press. But Ilara wasn't interested in his money. She was interested in her work. When we divorced, Ilara said, I took a small settlement, but I also started a new company silently, Vance Technologies. It's been operating in stealth mode for 5 years. I've been improving the patent. I've created the Vance Synth 2.0. It's 50% stronger, 30% lighter, and 100% mine. Marcus stopped pacing. Ilara, what are you saying? Arthur's company is based on obsolete product. He just doesn't know it yet. And as of 8 a.m. this morning, he no longer even has the license to use that product. She slid a document across the table. I don't want to sue him for money, Marcus. I want to acquire. Marcus read the document. It was a proposal, a hostile takeover bid. You're going to use the patent violation to force a breach, he whispered, realizing the audacity. You're not going to sue him for damages. You're going to claim the assets built on your stolen intellectual property. You're going to take over the whole company. Not the whole company, Ilara said, standing and walking to the window. The sun was just beginning to streak the Madrid sky purple. The whole company is bloated, inefficient, and built on his ego. I only want the Alcazar Defense Division, the R&D labs, the parts that were mine from the beginning. He will fight, Marcus warned. The board will fight. Let them fight, Ilara said, her reflection staring back at her in the glass. They are about to find out that their entire empire is built on a foundation that I am about to revoke. Send the first letter at 8:30 a.m. A cease and desist order to all Sterling construction manufacturing plants, effective immediately for patent infringement. That will paralyze his global operations. The stock will. Yes, it will, Ilara said. And a second letter, she continued, to the board of directors. An emergency meeting tomorrow. Tell them Ms. Vance has a proposal to save them from the ruin their CEO just caused. Marcus looked at the woman before him. This was not the quiet, barren ex-wife the world thought it knew. This was an architect, and she had just drawn the blueprints for the most brutal and elegant execution he had ever seen. He shouldn't have laughed, Ilara, Marcus said. No, Ilara nodded, watching the city awaken. He shouldn't have. Act 5. The Sterling Earthquake. The first tremor hit at 9:01 a.m. Arthur Sterling was in his private gym when his phone began to vibrate so violently it nearly fell off the treadmill. He ignored it. It was his COO, Robert. Robert could wait. The second tremor hit at 9:15 a.m. when he walked into his own company's operations room. The atmosphere was a tomb. The massive news ticker on the wall, usually a sea of green, was a cascade of blood red. 2250, PDN 31.7, PDN 40, 10. What the hell is going on? Arthur roared, grabbing the nearest analyst. We don't know, sir, the young man stammered. A cease and desist order just hit the newswire. All our manufacturing plants, China, Germany, Madrid, they're shutting down. It's a patent dispute. The stock, it's in free fall. Patent dispute. With whom? That's the thing, sir, the analyst said, his face white. The filing. It's from Vance Technologies. We don't know who they are. But Arthur knew. He didn't run to his office. He teleported. He slammed the door shut, his hands shaking. Vance. It couldn't be. She didn't own. She wasn't. His private line rang. It was Marcus Thorne. You can't do this, Ilara! He roared into the phone, skipping all formalities. This is insane. You'll destroy us. You'll destroy yourself. Your equity is tied up in this. Marcus Thorne's voice was impossibly calm. Good morning, Arthur. I'm afraid Ms. Vance is no longer a shareholder. She sold her remaining shares over 6 months ago at peak value. Clever. Really. It's as if she knew an unstable element might compromise the company's integrity. You, Arthur couldn't breathe. She's bluffing. This is blackmail. How much does she want? 10 million? 100? Ms. Vance is not interested in your money, Arthur. She's interested in your property. The cease and desist order is real. You have 24 hours to halt all production using her intellectual property, which, if I recall correctly, is everything. The board has been notified. They meet tomorrow at 10 sharp. I advise you to attend. The line clicked dead. Arthur slumped into his chair. Barren. A word. A laugh. The third tremor hit at noon. Carmen Torres's article for Hello hit online. It wasn't a gossip column. It was a corporate character assassination. It was titled, The King's Laugh, How Arthur Sterling's Hubris Just Cost Him an Empire. It didn't just report the insult. It analyzed it. It painted Serafina as a cheap, cruel usurper. It painted Arthur not as a king, but as a weak, pathetic man hiding behind his new wife's skirts while mocking the woman who built his kingdom. It recontextualized everything. Suddenly, all the old stories of the barren wife looked like what they were, a misogynistic smear campaign. At 2:00 p.m., PDN stock was suspended. The company had lost 40% of its value. Billions. Erased. The fourth tremor was personal. He stormed back into the penthouse. Serafina was in the living room, on the phone with her publicist, shrieking. "What do you mean? Hello? Won't take my call? I am... Get out," Arthur whispered, his voice trembling with a rage so cold it terrified her. "What? Arthur, darling, it's just a silly article." "You," he said, advancing on her. "This was you, your petty, stupid act. You had to poke her. You had to win." "I was defending you," Serafina shrieked, backing away. "You weren't defending me. You were starting a forest fire. Do you have any idea what she's done?" He grabbed a priceless Ming vase, one Ilara had bought, and hurled it against the wall. It shattered. She's suing us," Serafina whimpered. "Worse," he roared. "She's not suing us. She's revoking." He didn't even understand the full scope, but he knew it was bad. The patents, the company, all of it is tied to her. Serafina's mind raced. "Julian, the plan, this is too soon." "The baby," she tried, her hand going to her stomach. "Arthur, the stress, the air." "I don't care about the heir," he screamed. "What good is an heir if he inherits nothing?" He grabbed her arm. "You're going to fix this. You're going to call her. You're going to apologize. You're going to beg her." Serafina looked at him, at this pathetic, broken man. Her only anchor, his power, was gone, and in its place was a terrified bully. She just stared at him, her own panic mounting. The plan was in ruins. Julian hadn't returned her text in hours. The man who had laughed 24 hours ago was gone. The man before her was weeping. Act 6. The execution at Sterling Tower, the boardroom on the 80th floor of Sterling Tower, was a cathedral of glass and fear. The board members, old industry titans, tech billionaires, and retired generals, were assembled. One chair was empty at the head of the table. Arthur was seated on the right, looking like he had aged 20 years. Serafina was nowhere to be seen. Julian Sterling was sitting at the far end, his face a perfect, unreadable mask. "This is an outrage," Arthur blustered, though his voice was weak. "A marital dispute. It's a bitter woman. It is a woman who just cost us 30 billion euros in 8 hours, Arthur." General Garrido, a man who ran the Alcázar Defense Division, growled. "I have a call from the Ministry of Defense screaming about national security. Our contracts are frozen. Explain that. We are negotiating." The back doors of the room burst open. Ilara Vance walked in, flanked by Marcus Thorne and a team of forensic accountants. She wore a white pantsuit, sharp as a razor. She looked like an avenging angel. "Ms. Vance," General Garrido said, rising, "you do not belong on this board." "No," Marcus Thorne said, his voice filling the room. "But her new company, Vance Technologies, does. As of this morning, Vance Technologies has acquired a 30% stake in Sterling Construction, bought on the open market at a significant discount. She is now the single largest shareholder. She has the right to be here." The board stared. Arthur looked ready to vomit. "Good morning, gentlemen," Ilara said, her voice cool and clear. She took the empty seat at the head of the table. Arthur's seat. "Let's dispense with the formalities," she said. 20 years ago, I invented a material called Vance Synth. I allowed Mr. Sterling to build a company around it. In his name, in exchange for his silence on a delicate personal matter." She paused, and her eyes found Arthur's. He broke that agreement. He called me Baron at a party, Alara said, and for the first time, every person in that room heard the story from her side. A term he knew to be false, a lie he created, a lie I carried for him for 15 years to protect his ego, his condition. The board fell silent. Condition? A member whispered. Arthur Sterling is, and always has been, sterile, Alara stated flatly. The gasp in the room was deafening. Arthur was exposed. The king was not just naked, he was a fraud. Which, Alara continued, her gaze sweeping the table, leads us to a fascinating secondary problem. Her eyes landed on Julian, and then, for the first time, she acknowledged the elephant in the room. Serafina, she said, though the woman wasn't there. His new wife, who, according to the tabloids, is pregnant. The room went from silent to a black hole. Arthur's head snapped up. He looked at Julian. Julian merely smiled. The board members, men who lived and died by calculation, did the math simultaneously. Sterile man, plus pregnant wife. It appears, Alara said, Mr. Sterling's legacy is not his own. Arthur looked at Julian. The betrayal, the total betrayal, finally landed. The affair, the baby, the stock play. It was a coup. Julian! You, Arthur choked out. Julian finally spoke. It was a good plan, Arthur, but you got sloppy. You let your ego get in the way. So, Alara cut in, reclaiming the room. Here is the situation. Your CEO is a fraud, your heir is an imposter, and your entire company is guilty of massive patent infringement. As of now. She pressed a button. The main screen lit up. This, she said, is Vance Synth 2.0. It is the technology I've been perfecting. It is what the market truly wants. It makes the material you are all using obsolete. She offered them a choice. Option A, you do nothing. My cease and desist stands. Sterling Construction goes bankrupt by Friday. You all lose everything. I build my company on your ashes. She paused. Option B, you vote. Right now. You remove Arthur Sterling as CEO. You remove Julian Sterling from the board. I do not work with traitors. You give me a controlling stake, 51%. You appoint me chairwoman of the board and CEO. In exchange, I will license Vance Synth 2.0 to this company. I will save the Alcazar contracts. I will save your fortunes. General Garrido did not hesitate. All those in favor of removing Arthur Sterling as CEO? All hands shot up, except Julian's and Arthur's. All those in favor of removing Julian Sterling from the board? All hands. All those in favor, the general said, of appointing Ms. Alara Vance as chairwoman and CEO? The vote was unanimous. Arthur Sterling simply stood there, an empty shell. He had lost his company, his wife, his fake child, and his legacy. All for one laugh. Alara stood up. Thank you, gentlemen. The new era of this company starts now. My team is securing the 80th floor. She looked at the two cousins. Arthur, Julian, security will escort you out. Alara walked up to Arthur, who was staring blankly at the table. She leaned in, her voice a whisper only he could hear. Who is incomplete now, Arthur? Epilogue. The architect of thousands. The collapse of Arthur and Serafina was swift and deserved. Arthur ended up a pathetic figure in the Gold Mile bars, a living monument to his own stupidity, drinking brandy and mumbling about his barren ex-wife who had robbed him. No one listened. Serafina, betrayed by Julian, who was also neutralized by Alara's non-compete clauses, was last spotted by a hello photographer at Atocha station, arguing with a bus depot clerk. As the old world burned, Alara Vance was building. Under her leadership, the company didn't just stabilize, it soared. Forbes put her on the cover. The billion-dollar architect, the woman who built, was betrayed and built it better. A year after the boardroom execution, Alara received a call from Dr. Elena Cruz, the endocrinologist. "Alara," the doctor said softly, "I just read your profile in El País, Woman of the Year. I just wanted to apologize for all those years. I was bound by ethics, by his threats, but I regret being a part of that lie." Alara paused, looking out from her new glass-walled office at the city that was now truly hers. "Elena," she said, her voice warm, "you were not part of his lie. You were the only person in that room who told me the truth. You have nothing to apologize for. Still, what he did to you, what he called you, it's just a word, Elena," Alara said, "and it no longer holds any power." Alara's new project launch was not at the Prado. It was at a plot of land that had been vacant for a decade in a working-class district. It was a cold, bright day. The crowd was not socialites in feathers, but community leaders, foster parents, and 100 noisy, excited children in bright blue hard hats. Alara Vance stepped up to the podium. She wore a smart, practical wool coat, her hair pulled back. She looked happy. After her speech about the new building, a reporter called out. It was Carmen Torres, the hello reporter. She was no longer snarky. She was humbled. "Ms. Vance," she shouted. "Carmen Torres, hello. A year ago, I saw you humiliated. Now you are the most powerful woman in Madrid. You've rebuilt an empire. But I have to ask, after all this, do you ever regret it? Not having children of your own?" The crowd fell silent. This was the question, the one that had defined her. Alara smiled, a genuine, bright, unshakable smile. She walked to the front of the podium, her eyes finding the children in the front row. "Thank you for that question, Carmen," she said, her voice clear and resonating in the cold air. "It is a question that has followed me my whole life, in whispers, in pitying glances, and at parties, in very loud, cruel jokes. For 15 years, I lived in silence. I allowed a narrative to be written for me, a story of what I lacked, a story of being incomplete, a story of being barren. I did it to protect a man's fragile ego. I thought that was loyalty. I was wrong. My ex-husband, and men like him, believe a legacy is something simple and primal. It is blood. It is a name. It is a son. They believe a woman's worth is tied only to what she can produce. They are tragically mistaken." She spread her hands, pointing to the building plans behind her. "A legacy is not about producing. It is about building. A true legacy is not about what you leave behind in your blood. It is about what you leave behind in the world. It is about the foundations you lay for others. Today, we are standing on what was once called barren land. It was overlooked. It was underestimated. It was forgotten. It has much in common with me. And today, we will plant a seed. Not a seed of ego. Not a seed of blood. A seed of opportunity. A seed of knowledge. A seed of hope." She pointed to the sign being unveiled. The Alara Vance Children's Center, an academy for STEM, art, and leadership for the next generation. "My predecessor," she said, "thought an heir was something he could buy or create through a lie. But these are my heirs, She gestured to the children. This center, the promise. This is my family. This is my legacy. So, to answer your question, Carmen, do I regret not having a son? No, because I have realized I am not the mother of one. I am the architect of thousands. I was never barren. I was just busy building a better future. She turned, picked up a golden shovel, and plunged it into the cold earth. The crowd erupted. The camera flashes this time were not for a scandal. They were for a beginning. As she lifted the first scoop of dirt, a little girl in a hard hat ran up and handed her a slightly wilted daisy. Elara Vance took the flower, her eyes shining, and laughed. A real, full, joyful laugh. It was the only one that mattered. In a reflection, and there ends our story. A laugh at a party, a moment of cruel public mockery became the trigger for the greatest comeback in the history of the Madrid elite. The new wife, who thought she had it all, learned that a baby is not a weapon. It is a person. And the billionaire, who thought he was a king, learned that the woman he called barren was actually the only one who could grow something real. Elara Vance proved that a legacy is not about what you produce. It is about what you build. What did you think of Elara's final revenge? Do you think it was karmic justice, or was it too cold and calculating? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of retribution and triumph, please show your support. Give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to see a good comeback, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. We have new dramas arriving every week.